Welcome to Shatter.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. It happened at Starbucks, of all places. The kind of spot where people pretend they're working but are really performing. She was across the table, laughing a little too loudly at something her coworker said. He leaned in, said something I couldn't hear, and she reached out, just enough for her fingertips to brush his sleeve. The sound of her laugh hit me like static. Then she looked at me and said, "Oh, come on. It's just fun. Just fun." That's what she called it. I didn't respond. I just nodded, finished my coffee, and let the silence sit between us. On the surface, nothing broke. Inside, something permanent did. I watched her scroll Slack later that night on her MacBook, smiling at her screen the way she used to smile at me. Tiny emojis. Inside jokes I wasn't part of. Every buzz from her iPhone pulled her attention somewhere else. She didn't notice that I'd stopped asking who it was. She didn't notice much at all anymore. At Chipotle the next day, she laughed again, this time at something her buddy had texted. She said, "You're being paranoid. It's harmless." I said, "So is being single." She froze, then brushed it off like it didn't matter. But the thing about code, and about people, is that once you see a bug, you can't unsee it. You either fix it, or you delete the system. That night, while she was asleep, I looked at her reflection in the dark screen of my laptop. I realized I wasn't angry. I was done. The next morning, I drove my Honda Accord to work before sunrise. I didn't take my usual route. I didn't even take my phone. I needed distance, clean, quiet distance. When I got to the office, I logged into Slack one last time. I opened our private chat, scrolled through months of empty words, and hovered over the three dots. Then I clicked delete conversation. No warning. No goodbye. By the time she finished her Starbucks latte and opened her MacBook, my account was gone. My messages, gone. My number, unreachable. For the first time in years, she couldn't find me. And that's when I realized something she hadn't yet. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. When she realized I was gone, it didn't hit her right away. The first few hours, she probably thought I was just cooling off. She sent a couple of texts that went green instead of blue, shrugged, and went back to scrolling through Slack, expecting my name to pop up again. But it didn't. The silence wasn't temporary, it was engineered. By the second day, she tried calling. Twice. I saw the missed calls on my secondary phone, the one she never knew I had. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail that started casual, then cracked halfway through. "I don't know what this is, but can you just call me?" It was the tone of someone who still believed she had control. She didn't. At work, she looked for me in the company directory. Nothing. I'd left the system completely. My profile, my emails, every trace of my digital shadow, wiped. Even on Slack, my name now read, "User not found." The same words I'd once used as a joke while debugging code were now my signature. That night, I sat alone in a small diner off the highway, my Honda parked outside under a flickering sign. The waitress poured me coffee, no questions asked. It felt strange, quiet in a way I hadn't felt in months. I thought about the messages she was probably typing, deleting, retyping. The way she'd stare at her MacBook waiting for the gray bubble to appear, not realizing that the program had already been shut down. She told people I needed space. She laughed it off during lunch at Chipotle with her coworkers, pretending she wasn't checking her iPhone every minute. But I knew her rhythm. How silence made her nervous, how absence made her frantic. She built her world on constant feedback, and I just pulled the plug. The following morning, she showed up at the parking lot of my old office. My car wasn't there. She stood in the cold for a while, holding her coffee, scanning every window. Maybe she thought she'd find me watching her, ready to come back. But I was already somewhere else entirely, in a quieter place that didn't include her. And for the first time, she started to understand. Disappearing wasn't an accident. It was precision. She started digging for traces of me the way someone looks for old photos after a funeral. My absence turned into her obsession. She checked every platform, every shared cloud folder, every trace of our digital life together. All she found were locked files and error messages. On Slack, her coworker sent her a meme like nothing had changed, and she forced a laugh, but her eyes didn't move from my empty icon. I didn't just delete things. I rewrote the access. My email, my bank accounts, even our shared Spotify plan. Everything disconnected in the same hour. The algorithm still recommended her my old playlists, long nights of coding, slow piano, rain loops. I knew she'd eventually play one out of habit, thinking she'd hear me there. But all she'd get was silence between the tracks. I heard through a mutual friend that she'd started staying late at the office, claiming extra work. Maybe she thought the same coworker who once made her laugh could fill the gap I left. But it didn't work like that. What she had with him was noise. What she lost with me was signal. At night, I'd drive my car past places we used to go. Not out of longing, out of confirmation. The world still moved without her. The neon from the Starbucks sign flickered against the windshield, and I remembered her smile across that table, the one that ended it all. She probably went there still, hoping to replay a scene she thought she controlled. But the lighting was different now, colder. I stayed off social media completely. I didn't need to see her posts or her quotes about healing and boundaries. I already knew the script. The part where she paints herself as the one who was left too suddenly, too harshly. The part where she calls it overreaction. But there was nothing reactionary about what I'd done. Every move was intentional, clean, calculated. And while she scrolled her iPhone, trying to piece together the pattern, I was writing new code on my laptop, building something from zero again. That's the thing about systems. When they crash, you don't cry over the fragments. You rebuild the architecture from silence. She started calling mutual friends, trying to act casual. "He's just taking time for himself," she said, as if she'd been the one to suggest it. But her voice trembled, just slightly, when someone asked if I was okay. They told her I was fine. Focused. Calm. That was the part she couldn't process. How someone could vanish without rage, without a final argument, without the need to be understood. I'd rented a small apartment on the other side of the city. Bare walls, one desk, one chair, my laptop, and silence that felt clean. No reminders. No noise. Every morning, I'd drive my Honda to a different Starbucks, open my MacBook, and start new projects. I'd go hours without checking my phone. It was freedom disguised as routine. Meanwhile, she began to show cracks. I didn't see it firsthand, but people talk. She was quieter at work. Her messages on Slack were shorter. The coworkers she used to flirt with stopped dropping by her desk. Maybe he felt the shift too. Maybe she wasn't fun anymore when the laughter didn't echo. She'd lost the audience, and the stage lights had dimmed. One evening, I got an email from her. Not from her usual account, a new one. No subject line, just a single sentence. "Can we talk?" I didn't open it. I just stared at it for a while, the cursor hovering over the trash icon. Then I deleted it, emptied the folder, and powered down. It wasn't cruelty. It was consistency. I took a drive that night, windows down, city lights fading behind me. I passed a Chipotle we used to visit, saw her car parked outside. She was alone, scrolling through her iPhone with that same restless energy, waiting for something that wasn't coming. I parked across the street for a moment, unseen, just long enough to realize she hadn't changed. Still chasing reactions, still confusing attention for connection. Then I started the car and drove away. I didn't need closure. I already had it. The moment she called betrayal harmless. That was the point I decided. If she could treat loyalty like a joke, I could treat her absence like peace. A week later, I heard she'd started showing up early to work, pretending everything was fine. But there was a rumor floating around. Something about her and the coworker, the one she called just a friend. Someone had seen messages that weren't meant to be seen. Screenshots, half-deleted threads, emojis that said more than words ever could. The office didn't confront her directly, but people started watching differently. That's the thing about silence. It spreads faster than gossip. I didn't plan revenge. I didn't need to. The structure was collapsing on its own. She had built her comfort on validation, on being seen, but now every look she got felt like suspicion. The same attention she once craved was now scrutiny. And I didn't lift a finger. She sent another email, this time longer. Apologies, confusion, explanations I never asked for. She said she missed me, that she didn't realize what she was doing. But that was the point. She never realized because she never listened. Every conversation had been a mirror for her reflection, never a window to mine. That night, I sat in my apartment with a bowl of takeout from Chipotle, music low on Spotify. I'd stopped checking for her name weeks ago, but a song we used to play together slipped into the queue. For a second, I almost skipped it. Then I let it play. The melody didn't hurt anymore. It just sounded neutral, like background noise in a life that had already been rewritten. Meanwhile, she was losing her balance. A friend told me she started deleting old photos, locking her social media, saying she needed a reset. She didn't understand. Resets don't fix corrupted systems. You rebuild them from scratch. I knew she'd keep searching, keep refreshing, waiting for some sign that I still cared. But I was long past that point. There's a kind of power in not needing to be found. In a world addicted to connection, disappearing isn't weakness, it's control. And as the city lights blurred outside my window, I realized the irony. She'd spent months chasing attention, and now the one person whose attention meant something was permanently offline. The story started to turn against her quietly, like a rumor that no one wanted to confirm, but everyone believed. People at work began to notice the way she'd check her phone every few minutes, her smile forced, her energy off. The same coworker who once hovered near her desk now avoided eye contact. I didn't have to expose her. Her own actions were doing that for me. The attention she'd built her identity around had become a spotlight she couldn't escape. Someone told me she broke down during a team lunch, something small setting her off. She said she was just tired, but everyone could see it was more than that. The office chat on Slack went silent for a while after that, like people were finally realizing what had been going on under their noses. She wasn't the center of the fun anymore. She was the warning sign. I was sitting in my car that evening, parked near the bay, watching the lights from the city ripple across the water. My phone buzzed once, an unknown number. I knew it was her. I didn't pick up. I just let it ring until it stopped, then blocked it. The sound of that silence afterward felt cleaner than any apology could have. Back at her apartment, I imagined she was staring at her iPhone, scrolling through old messages she'd forgotten to delete, wondering when exactly it had all started to go wrong. Maybe she replayed that night at Starbucks, the one she called Harmless. Maybe she realized that the moment she laughed too long at someone else's joke, something permanent shifted. Her friends stopped inviting her out. People started whispering that she'd changed, that she wasn't herself lately. The same charm she once used so easily now felt strained, transparent. I didn't take pleasure in it. I didn't need to. The balance had simply restored itself. And while she unraveled under the weight of her own decisions, I found peace in the simplest things: a quiet morning coffee, a clean line of code, the sound of nothing demanding my attention. She wanted the world to notice her. I wanted the world to forget. And that's exactly what was happening. By the time a month passed, she had become a shadow of the person she used to be. Not because I'd done anything to her, but because she finally ran out of people to distract herself with. The coworker she once joked with had moved on. The small group she used to eat lunch with now sat somewhere else. In a space built on chatter and connection, she'd become the quiet one. That was always my role. Now it was hers. I heard from someone at work that she'd started taking her lunch breaks alone, sitting in her car in the parking lot, eating Chipotle out of a paper bowl, scrolling through her phone with no messages coming in. The silence she once avoided had finally caught her. I didn't need to watch her learn the lesson. I could already picture it. At night, when I was writing code, I'd sometimes imagine the moment she opened Spotify and found my old playlist still sitting there. Soft tracks, long silences between them. She probably played it without realizing what it meant, how much time and emotion had been stored in those notes. And when she did realize, I knew she'd stop it halfway through. Some memories sting more when they come wrapped in sound. I'd started to rebuild my life quietly. New clients, new focus, early mornings that didn't start with tension. My phone stayed silent, and for once, it felt like peace, not emptiness. The absence wasn't punishment, it was clarity. The longer she stayed out of my world, the sharper that clarity became. One evening, while driving home, I caught a glimpse of her at a red light. She was in the next lane, staring straight ahead, the same iPhone glowing in her hand. She didn't see me, and I didn't look twice. The light turned green, and I drove forward. In that moment, I realized something that surprised me. It wasn't anger or satisfaction I felt. It was neutrality. She had lost the power to move anything inside me. She had become background noise in a life I'd already rewritten. And that silence, that clean distance, was everything she'd once called boring, and everything I'd learned to protect. Weeks later, she finally tried to reach me through someone else. A mutual friend sent a message saying she wanted to meet, that she only wanted to talk. I didn't respond. The friend followed up, said she looked different, tired, quiet, smaller somehow. I knew exactly what that meant. She'd finally reached the point where words stopped working. One evening, I left my apartment to grab a coffee. The place was quiet, just a few people working on laptops, the usual low hum of conversation. When I walked back to my car, I saw her standing near the curb. She didn't speak right away. She just looked at me, the kind of look that searches for a version of you that no longer exists. She said she didn't mean for any of it to happen, that she missed us, that it was all misunderstood. I didn't interrupt. I just listened to the sound of her trying to turn chaos into explanation. Then she said something that almost made me laugh. She said, "I thought you'd fight for me." Fight. That was her word. As if silence wasn't stronger. I didn't say much. Just told her that I wasn't angry, that I'd already moved past the part where she mattered more than my peace. Her eyes searched my face, waiting for something, a sign of softness, maybe hope. But there wasn't any. She started crying then, not loud, just quiet tears that didn't ask for comfort. The kind of crying that comes when you realize the person in front of you is already gone. I stepped back, gave her a small nod, and said, "Take care of yourself." That was it. No scene, no closure speech. When I got in my car, I didn't look back. In the rearview mirror, I saw her still standing there, phone in hand, probably thinking of what to text next, not realizing that every word she typed would go nowhere. For her, it was a plea for reconnection. For me, it was confirmation. I'd built my life again, line by line, code by code, and there was no space left for what once broke it. After that night, she stopped reaching out directly, but traces of her began appearing in small ways. A new follower on an old account, a playlist added to Spotify with songs we once shared, photos from places we used to go, posted with vague captions about growth and healing. It wasn't subtle, but I understood what it was, her last attempt to be seen by someone who no longer looked her way. I didn't block her this time. I didn't have to. I'd already taken away what she really wanted, access. Not to my number, not to my life, but to my attention. The algorithm couldn't bridge what she broke. My silence had become her reflection, and she didn't like what she saw there. A friend told me she'd been moved to another department at work. The coworker, the one she used to laugh with, was gone too. No explanation. Just gone. She looked drained, like someone carrying a secret too heavy to hide anymore. People whispered about her, but not in the same way they once did. The interest was gone. The noise she'd thrived on had finally gone quiet. Meanwhile, my world kept expanding. I was freelancing more, taking new contracts, learning new systems. My days started with focus, ended with calm. The chaos she once brought into my life had been replaced by structure. Peace didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt earned. One afternoon, while running errands, I stopped at a Starbucks. The same one where everything started. She was there, sitting alone by the window, staring into a cup that had long gone cold. For a second, our eyes met. There was no anger, no recognition of the past, just that silent understanding that the story had already ended. She looked down, pretending to check her iPhone, but her hand was trembling. I walked past her, out the door, the sound of traffic washing away whatever remained between us. And that's when I realized the final truth. She hadn't lost me when I left. She'd lost me the moment she made something sacred feel casual. Everything after that was just her learning to live without the echo. Months later, I stopped thinking about her altogether. Not out of effort, but because my mind had finally released her. She'd become part of a story I no longer needed to reread. I'd moved into a new apartment closer to the water, minimal, quiet, the kind of place where peace doesn't need explaining. My days fell into rhythm. Work, coffee, late-night drives with no destination. Life wasn't dramatic anymore. It was precise. Then one evening, I got an email. The name was familiar, but I almost didn't recognize it. The subject line was blank. Inside, a single sentence. I finally understand. No attachments, no apology, no explanation. Just that. For a moment, I stared at it, remembering the woman who once filled every silence with noise, every quiet moment with distraction. And now, she'd reduced everything to one sentence. Maybe that was her way of saying she'd met the silence I'd left behind. I didn't reply. I just closed the laptop, turned off the lights, and sat in the stillness that used to make me uneasy. It didn't anymore. I'd learned that peace doesn't come when things go right. It comes when you stop giving energy to what drains you. The next morning, I drove to Starbucks. Same order as always, same quiet corner. Outside, people rushed to work, screens glowing, notifications buzzing. The noise of the world kept spinning, but I wasn't part of it anymore. I'd built my own rhythm. Later, as I walked to my car, I saw a reflection in the glass. A man calm, composed, unreachable. I barely recognized him. Not because he'd changed too much, but because he'd finally become who he was supposed to be before the chaos. Maybe she'd see that reflection one day too, somewhere between her playlists and unread messages. Maybe she'd understand that some losses don't happen when people leave. They happen when they stop being available to the version of you that never learned how to value them. I started the car, the sun breaking through the clouds, and for the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. And in that quiet, one final thought crossed my mind, clear and steady. I didn't disappear. I just stopped showing up where I wasn't respected. Real men don't explode. They exit. Subscribe for more power stories.